next 100 years.
This is KHOU-TV, Houston.
Tonight, CBS Late Night features Simon & Simon and Cleopatra Jones will begin right after the following CBS News Special Report. This is a CBS News Special Report. The Chief Justice steps down. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. For only the 16th time in history, a new Chief Justice of the United States has been named. A change at the top, at the nation's highest court. Changes in the mix of the 9 people who judge the law of the land, including many of the toughest and touchiest social issues of the day. Chief Justice of the United States Warren Burger has resigned effective early July, ending 17 years in the post. At age 78, Burger says he wants to devote his full attention now to next year's 200th anniversary of the U.S. Constitution. William Rehnquist, an ideologically conservative Nixon appointee to the Supreme Court, is President Reagan's choice to move up to be the new Chief Justice. And to fill the one vacancy, the Rehnquist vacancy, President Reagan has chosen Anton Scalia, a Rehnquist-style conservative federal appeals court judge, father of 9, a second-generation American whose father immigrated from Sicily. Very few people know what it is like to carry the rank and responsibility of Chief Justice. In Washington today, Warren Burger, Chief Justice soon to retire, gave a rare personal interview to CBS News correspondent Bill Moyers.
And this is the Supreme Court of the United States. Cameras have never been allowed in here before, but I was in Washington and in this room to conduct an interview today with Chief Justice Warren Burger. We were going to talk about the Constitution, one of his favorite subjects. But as the saying goes in our business, circumstances beyond our control intervene. The Chief Justice was late. It seems he was at the White House where the President was announcing Mr. Burger's retirement from this court after 17 years. Chief Justice came back. He wanted to conduct the interview anyway. He likes to talk about the Constitution. So we sat here for an hour with that discussion. But obviously we talked not only about the Constitution, but about the decision Mr. Burger announced today. Here are excerpts from that conversation. Mr. Chief Justice, you've just come back this very moment from the White House where you announced your retirement from what many people consider the most powerful judicial post in the world. Chief Justice of the United States. Why?
Chiefly, if not entirely, so that I can devote my full time to the work of preparing for the celebration of the bicentennial of the Constitution. I consider that celebration more important than my staying on the court for another couple of years.
But the bicentennial is looking back. The court is shaping the future. You're walking away from the power to create tomorrow.
Well, I've had my share now for 17 years of what you call having something to do with the future. I don't believe judges or justices should stay around forever until they're carried off. My health is good.
Are you tired?
A good deal of the time, yes. A good deal of the time.
How many hours did you put in last week?
I'd guess last week between 80 and 90. That's about average.
Okay.
That includes the time sitting in the car reading briefs. If you look over the kinds of cases of just the last 15 years, 17 years, my tenure, and look at the previous 17 and then the previous 17 and go back, you see an enormous change in what we're doing.
Describe that change to me.
Well, who would have thought 30 or 40 years ago that someone would bring to this court the claim that little Johnny was given a B- in literature in his high school class, and he should have got an A. And they went to the lower courts and got what they should have got, but tried to come up here and get us to review that kind of a question. If there is a problem with the judicial system, with the whole political in this country today, it is a widespread feeling that the courts should resolve everything. You remember Lord Bryce said that a long time ago. Sooner or later, every important question in America comes to the Supreme Court. That's really a contradiction of democracy. the people's representatives should decide the major questions. We are not the people's representatives in that sense, because the people didn't elect us or pick us. But our job isn't to try to correct the errors of Congress, errors of judgment. They're the representatives of the people, elected by the people. And if they pass an unwise law, I'm going to enforce it, unless it violates the Constitution.
Do you think the framers ever realized that the court would be handling as many cases as come before it today?
No. I haven't done any counting, but I would suspect that most of the justices sitting on this court now have written as many opinions as John Marshall did in his 34 years. I'm not sure of the count, but in those days, there were times when they had only a dozen, 20 or 30 cases a year. Now, 5,000 filed a year.
Can the court really do justice to that workload?
We can't do it the way it ought to be done. I don't think I'll answer your question just the way you put it. We don't do the work with that same degree of quality that the country is entitled to expect. Years ago, Frankfurter and other scholars who followed the Supreme Court closely at Harvard came to the conclusion that 100 fully argued cases with signed opinions a year was the maximum capacity for this court, for 9 people to do it.
Did you change in these 17 years?
I'd have to leave that to other people. Somebody else has got to decide that.
When Chief
put on more weight, among other things.
You going to get some of that off now?
In a moment, more of Bill Moyers' extraordinary interview with Chief Justice Warren Burger, including what the Chief Justice considered to be his toughest case.
This portion of the CBS News Special Report is sponsored by General Motors, the GM Odyssey, science, not fiction.
Christopher, hi, it's me. How are you doing? You did? That's great. I can't wait to see it.
This man is an explorer.
Tell Mommy I'm on my way.
One of thousands at General Motors embarking on an odyssey into the unknown, filled with technological wonders that might seem like science fiction. But at GM, they're becoming reality now. Lasers that probe body structure, sophisticated instrument displays, computer-simulated testing, electronic navigation systems. But the road doesn't stop here. The 21st century lies dead ahead, and GM is leading the way there. Today's GM is evolving into a GM the future will demand, driving America down roads we've never been before. The GM Odyssey. Science, not fiction.
We are going to have a look at the new Chief Justice and the new Justice for the Supreme Court as we go along on this broadcast. But right now, more from Bill Moyers' interview in Washington today with retiring Chief Justice of the United States, Warren Burger. After 17 years on the court with the Watergate scandals, the still deeply divisive landmark ruling on abortion, and so much more, Moyers asked Burger what was his most difficult case.
Every one of the capital cases is a painful experience.
Because?
A person is going to be put to death. Sometimes it isn't even very reassuring to look and find that person has been in the courts in trials for 12, 13, 14 years, had dozens of appeals, been heard by up to 100 judges at one time or another. And even when you look at the horror of the crime, it doesn't change the fact that the decision being made is this particular person is going to be put to death. That's not easy. I've been asked, for example, why do I like the death penalty? And so I put a return question, what makes you think I like the death penalty? because you have voted in favor of cases involving capital punishment. My answer is, my private views on the death penalty have nothing to do with it. The Constitution of the United States affirmatively permits Congress or the state legislatures to impose capital punishment. That is, you cannot take life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The corollary of that is clearly, with due process, you can. I like the Constitution better than I like my own private views.
On a more difficult issue for many, and you've unshackled yourself in a way by your decision today.
Not for a couple of weeks.
Not for a couple of weeks. How do you go about trying to divine original intent of the fact framers on the very difficult issue of abortion?
There is no way on that case. I had intended to say that there are some cases where it's very clear and very easy to divine the original intent. In other cases, not.
Well, I don't mean to press the issue because I know it's a sensitive one, but isn't the issue of abortion one of the most divisive in America right now?
Probably.
How have you wrestled with that? I know that you've gone back and forth in your own mind from what I hear and from what I read.
No.
I mean, and just how do you make up your mind?
Well, I haven't gone back and forth.
About what the court should do?
No. In the most recent case, to which you may have reference, I said we should be careful about about restraining the states from putting reasonable limitations. That's all.
But you still supported the 1973 Roe versus Wade.
I said in almost exactly the words in the opinion, the dissenting opinion, that if this case means what it seems to mean, perhaps the time has come to re-examine the whole subject. Now, that doesn't tell you very much, but...
It's certainly a hint to the next court, isn't it?
I don't know that I would define it that way. I'm not sure how I would define it. I was reflecting what's going on in my mind.
Have you had enough of this bench?
No. I'm not... I could well have enjoyed staying on the court another 2 years and celebrate my birthday on the 17th of September, 1787.
You cost this Baptist $100 because I bet someone you'd retire on your 80th birthday a year from September on the celebration of the...
Did you say a Baptist?
Mm-hmm.
Baptists shouldn't bet, especially on something as uncertain as that.
Bill, that last answer of the Chief Justice is very intriguing. Is there more to this burger change than meets the eye?
Well, I think when you're a young man, Dan, you don't hear the footsteps of mortality in the hall except faintly, if at all. When you get to be the justice's age, you hear the footsteps and the knocking on the door. And I honestly believe that the Chief Justice took a hard look at the passing years and what he'd like to do, write some books, do some sculpturing. And I don't think he feels as well as he did. I'm not the only one who's seen him 5 months ago and today who's been somewhat surprised, shocked, one man said, at how much more tired and exhausted he looks. So I really do think that was the ultimate factor.
Thank you, Bill, and we'll be looking forward to your special conversation with the Chief Justice on the burger years to be broadcast here on CBS July 9th. And we'll be back in just a moment.
The earth wakes up with you. You always feel that spark of life in everything you do.
Grape nuts. For you, it's as natural as the morning. No sugar added, no preservatives, just an honest nutty crunch. Post Grape Nuts cereal. You know when you've got it good.
Yes, you know when you've got it good.
Well, at least one of them's gold.
How about some coffee? It's decaffeinated.
Half a cup's fine.
You drink decaf.
Sure, and when I find one that's got a full flavor, I'll have a full cup.
This one does.
Brim?
It's got full, rich flavor.
Now this is a find. Fill it to the rim.
With the full, rich taste of Brim decaffeinated coffee. AT&T is in consumer marketing. Burger King serves over 4 million people every day. And every night, they use AT&T watts to collect clear, accurate data from their restaurants all over the country. So they always know what's selling. Is Burger King keeping their customers happy? With AT&T watts, the data is very clear. Talk with us. AT&T, the right choice.
You've been traded, Rolaids. For acid and gas, your performance is not up to tempo.
Sorry, but you're fired, Malox. You don't work hard enough. I'm switching to Tempo.
Our relationship is over, Tums. I found someone better. Tempo.
For better relief from acid and gas, people everywhere are switching to Tempo. Its soft form holds 75% more acid-relieving medicine than Rolaids. And soft Tempo dissolves fast. Switch to better relief. Switch to soft Tempo.
I'm glad I found you.
Before looking ahead to what figure to be the Rehnquist years, CBS News law correspondent Fred Graham takes a look first back now at the Berger years.
I'm very proud tonight to nominate as the 15th Chief Justice of the United States, Judge Warren Burger.
When Warren Burger became Chief Justice 17 years ago, a sense of counter-revolution was in the air. Under his predecessor, Earl Warren, the Supreme Court had been a bastion of liberalism. The Burger Court was expected to turn much of that around. Warren Burger was a law and order conservative, and soon only 2 justices appointed by Democratic presidents remained on the court. But those predictions proved only half right.
I think it's a court that's built upon the Warren years. I think historians will record that the Warren Court and the Burger Court had more in common than they had divergence.
The Burger Court did cut back on criminal suspects' rights. It strengthened the government's power to keep secrets, and it limited citizens' rights to travel abroad. Chief Justice Burger's First Amendment views tended to be direct. A CBS News camera approaches him in Lincoln, Nebraska. But there was a liberal side to Warren Burger as well.
I'm comforted sometimes by the fact that on the one hand, I am chastised for being too liberal and, on the other hand, for being too conservative.
But the habits of judicial activism had caught on even with the Burger Court. There continued to be some liberal blockbusters as before. The right of women to have abortions was declared in the controversial decision Roe versus Wade. Women's rights were strengthened in a string of cases, and busing was approved as a way of desegregating the schools. Finally, President Nixon was ordered to turn over the Watergate tapes, and it was established that even the president was not above the law. The actions of the Rehnquist court will determine whether the moderate Burger Court set the standard for the future, or if it was only a transition to an historic turn to the right. This is Fred Graham.
The man who would be the newest member of the Supreme Court is by no means a household name. Antonin Scalia even had to instruct reporters today in the proper pronunciation of his name. More familiar is William Rehnquist, who would move up to Chief Justice. Correspondent Bruce Morton profiles both men.
Antonin Scalia is 50, married, 9 children, member of an all-male Washington club. He is also confident and articulate, talking here at Georgetown University about the kind of decisions government has to make.
Even more rare are issues such as abortion, where a substantial segment of the population believes one course is morally impermissible and another substantial segment believes it is morally required. The vast majority of political issues, though often polemicized in moral terms, boil down to questions of prudence or utility.
Daniel Moyers met Scalia more than 20 years ago when they were on the Harvard Law Review.
He is an extroverted, charming, pleasant person, as well as an extremely intelligent person. He is not an iconoclast. He's going to be a leader of the court because of the strength of his views and the strength of his personality.
Scalia is the kind of person who will take the time and has the personality that enables him to work out compromises, to modify positions in a way to persuade another justice to come along.
But he has critics. New York Times columnist William Safire called him the worst enemy of free speech in America today. And a colleague and friend from Stanford University agrees Scalia may be tough on the press.
He will often be wrong, in my view. He will probably add a more restrictive view of the First Amendment to the conservative balance.
Scalia joins a court headed by another articulate conservative, William Rehnquist, a Nixon appointee, troubled in the past by medication taken to ease a painful back, often described as an intellectual who marches to his own drummer.
It is hard to recall a time when a Chief Justice was nominated who, from what was known about him, was so far from the center of the court.
But others say the court has moved in recent years so that Rehnquist is now closer to its center, and that Scalia and Rehnquist are a lot alike, so that the Chief Justice will be gaining a forceful advocate for his positions. Some think this will favor the government over the individual.
It's just going to be another hard pull for civil libertarians in the years ahead, and civil libertarians are used to that.
Rehnquist sees himself as conservative in the sense of seeing a limited role for the courts. The courts, he told the New York Times, are the brakes that tell the president and Congress, you're trying to do this, but you can't do it that way. The idea that the court should be way out in front, saying, look, this is the way the country ought to go, I don't think that was ever the purpose of the court. The new court may not be much more conservative than the old one. It is likely to be more articulate. This is Bruce Morton.
Christopher, hi, it's me. How are you doing? You did? That's great. I can't wait to see it.
This man is an explorer.
Tell Mommy I'm on my way.
One of thousands at General Motors embarking on an odyssey into the unknown, filled with technological wonders that might seem like science fiction. But at GM, they're becoming reality now. Lasers that probe body structure, sophisticated instrument displays, computer-simulated testing, electronic navigation systems. But the road doesn't stop here. The 21st century lies dead ahead, and GM is leading the way there. Today's GM is evolving into a GM the future will demand, driving America down roads we've never been before. The GM Odyssey. Science, not fiction.
Coming up on the next AM Houston.
Are you one of those women who's a fool for love? Do you stay in relationships you'd be better off leaving? Well, on our next AM, you'll meet the author of Women Who Love Too Much. Plus, Olympic gymnastics champion Mitch Gaylord. The women all love him. He's made his first movie, and he'll be with us next time on AM. Hope you can join us.
All this and more on the next AM Houston, Wednesday morning at 8 on Channel 11.
When it comes to news, there's no substitute for experience. And when it comes to covering news, there's no substitute for Channel 11's Steve Smith and Felicia Jeter. Steve Smith, with over 17 years as a Houston television journalist. Steve Smith knows Houston. Felicia Jeter, with 14 years as a seasoned reporter of local, national, and international events. Accurate, reliable, experience you can count on. Felicia Jeter and Steve Smith, together weeknights at 6 and 10 on Channel 11 News.
Joining me now to discuss today's change at the Supreme Court are Rex Lee, former Solicitor General of the United States, and Lawrence Tribe, Professor of Law at Harvard University. Gentlemen, good evening. We talk of the Warren Court and the Burger Court. Soon it could be the Rehnquist Court. Does it make a great deal of difference who is the Chief Justice, Professor Tribe?
It can make a very great deal of difference. Justice Rehnquist's intellect is extraordinary. He is a person who will bring articulateness and power of mind to a constitutional vision that some may not share. Clearly, senators are not going to have a hard time figuring out whether Justice Rehnquist and Judge Scalia are smart enough, talented enough for the position. Their historic task is to decide, and each senator can decide this only for himself, whether the approach to the Constitution, and it's obviously an extremely conservative approach that these men take, endangers constitutional values that the senators hold. When the Chief Justice wrote for 8 members of the court that the press and the public have a right to observe criminal trials, Justice Rehnquist was alone in dissent. When the Chief Justice wrote for 8 members of the court that governmental power cannot be given to churches, Justice Rehnquist was alone in dissent. I think senators are going to have to think hard about the trade-off between extraordinary power of intellect and certain fundamental constitutional principles.
Mr. Lee, do you think there's a tendency to overstate how much difference it makes who is the Chief Justice?
Yes, I do. Most of what Justice Rehnquist, well, most of the strength that he will bring to the court, he already has because he is there as an associate justice. There is one significant power that the Chief Justice has because he is the Chief Justice, and that's the authority to designate who is to write the majority opinion in those instances when he is in the majority. Now, that's not to be underestimated because it can be a very significant power, and I think it is one that the new Chief Justice will use with great skill and effectiveness. Insofar as Professor Tribe's comment about the direction that will probably be taken, I think that these are both magnificent appointments. I think that they will greatly strengthen the court. There is nothing that either of them has that any objective person, I think, could find objectionable, other than that he disagrees with him as a matter of substance.
Professor Tribe, they talk of now, if these two nominees are approved, the court sliding perhaps at least a little more ideologically conservative. Do you think that will be specifically on the points of the First Amendment and separation of church and state, or will it be broader and deeper than that?
Well, I think it's important to realize that the future of the court is impossible for anyone to predict. Anyone who hazards predictions and lives by the crystal ball in this area learns to eat a lot of ground glass. We really need to look, therefore, at qualities of mind and intellect and character, and both of these nominees are extraordinary in those dimensions. But the change may be deeper precisely because no one can yet predict what the issues will be. Andrew Jackson put a very talented Secretary of the Treasury on the court to kill the Bank of the United States, and 20 years later, that Secretary of the Treasury delivered the Dred Scott decision declaring blacks to be non-citizens and plunging the country into civil war. So clearly we have to look broadly and not make single-issue judgments about nominees to the court.
Excuse me, Professor Traub. Mr. Lee, we have only a few seconds left, but I want to give you a chance to respond. Do you agree that it'll be specifically in those two areas?
Oh, I don't know. But I think the thing to note is that one of the key features of the Constitution is the power of appointment. That is vested in the president. That's why we elect presidents. He has made his selection, and on any kind of objective basis, these are two superb appointments.
Thank you very much, Professor Tribe and Mr. Lee. And so tonight, changes at the Supreme Court, the pivotal institution in our constitutional system of checks and balances. For CBS News, with Bill Moyers, Fred Graham, and Bruce Morton, Dan Rather, good night.
You know, life's too short to worry about impressing other people. I mean, have you ever been really impressed by a person's credit card? What matters about a credit card is how it impresses me. MasterCard gives me what I want, and anything is possible. It goes where I want to go. Could be Timbuktu. When I want, day or night. Don't talk to me about impressions. Give me possibilities. MasterCard. Master the possibilities.
I live naturally. Always have. So, when my doctor said Metamucil keeps you regular naturally, I gave it a try.
Metamucil's fiber is my doctor's choice. It's a true natural laxative. So these days, I'm my regular self, thanks to Metamucil.
Trust is a delicate thing, not easy to come by. So knowing more doctors trust Metamucil makes me feel better than ever.
Natural fiber Metamucil.
It's tried,
true,
and trusted.
The Chief Justice steps down has been a special report from CBS News. This is CBS.
For better deals, why does Tom Gray Nissan sell more Nissans than any dealer in Texas?
It just might be the personal attention you get at Tom Gray Nissan.
Books cost too much, so I opened Crown Books. Now you'll never have to pay full price again. We have over 10,000 books to choose from, like Barbara Taylor Bradford's Act of Will, an extraordinary novel of drama and destiny, just $11.34.